A few weeks ago, I went to a comedy show in the city, and I got talking to this Irish guy who had this very interesting background. He had this debilitating fear of public speaking, so the obvious way to approach conquering that fear is, of course, becoming a stand-up comedian. So as a non-comedian, he pretended to be a stand-up comedian for a year to get over his fear of public speaking. An interesting way to attack it, but in the process of doing that, he learned a lot about comedy techniques, about stand-up techniques, and about public speaking in general. And he took all these ideas and he thought about how to make more effective presentations, which we had a long discussion about because I care deeply about public presentations and humor and how to make them all more engaging. And he took that information, he wrapped it up into a book. And I thought, well, that sounds like an interesting book. I'd like to read it someday. So 3 days later, there was an internal email at Google that said, hey, there's this author named David Nihill who has a new book coming out on public speaking. Would anybody like to host this? I thought, well, that's a perfect opportunity for me to have an excuse to actually read his book now. So here we are, a few weeks later, and he's going to tell us about how to make more effective presentations using techniques of stand-up comedians. I think we all know and suffer from public presentations that could be a heck of a lot more entertaining than they are. And there's no reason why they shouldn't be, except that maybe people don't know common techniques that could be used to make them so. So that's sort of what the book is about, and it's about what the presentation is about. And please welcome David Nihill.
Thank you. Fine introduction. So I know that sounds like the worst plan ever. You're scared of public speaking. You're going to pretend to be a comedian for a year. That does not sound like a good idea. It 100% was not a good idea. But at least we've written it down at this stage. I always, thanks for coming. I always like to ask who thinks they're not funny by show of hands. So is there anyone's like, I'm not funny at all? So 4 of you are not funny, and the rest of you are really, really funny. So this will be fine no matter what I say, because we can just call upon you guys to rock it, right? Anyone else hate public speaking? I totally hate public speaking, which is ironic that I'm nearly laying an egg on video right now here recording this one. How many? Keep the hands up. A little, get them up. I mean, like shaking the page kind of fear of public speaking. That was me, always. And nobody over here in the States knew. Obviously, I'm from Ireland originally with the dodgy accent, and I went to university in Ireland. And all my friends had me nicknamed Shakin' Stevens, because whenever I had a bit of paper in my hand with a presentation, public speaking, it would just start moving around like this all the time, and I'd start sweating. And do you know this feeling at all, anybody? And it's just getting worse. And I'm holding the microphone, I can't hold it steady anymore either. And it was always that bad for me. And honestly, I would have described it as a crippling fear. If you ask me in any way, public speaking for you, it is a crippling fear. And that was until a rather serious phone call that I got about a friend of mine, and it was to inform me that he just suffered a severe spinal cord injury, and he might never walk again. Right? And his insurance provider cut him off, and we were trying to come up with ways, because he was in no way accepting this, that he was never going to walk again. He's like, I'm going to get back on my feet. I just need to be able to do the rehab process to do it. So we're like, well, as his friends, we got together, we're like, let's start doing fundraisers to get him back on his feet. And I just happened to live next to this guy who was a touring comedian and a headlining comedian. And I was like, hey, Tim, would you by chance do this comedy show fundraiser we're going to do? I don't know anything about organizing it or anything, but let's do it. And he said yes. And all my friends were like, well, you're naturally pretty talkative. You're going to be the host because you're organizing it. And I was like, I am not hosting that. Never. Absolutely no way. And they were all just kept at me. No, you have to. And up to that moment, I was like, there's no way I can describe this as a fear that's crippling. I mean, faced with a more serious impact, the real impact of that word, I was like, all right, time to get over this. So I went and I did this, and I was looking right, if I had to get good at public speaking quickly and had to get over this fear, like who's the best person to study? Like where do I get the information from? There's books out there, I don't want to read them all, I don't really have time. Where do I get it from? Who are the true masters? So I was thinking, well, comedians are probably the true masters of public speaking. I just read a lot of Malcolm Gladwell, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, and his 10,000 hour rule that makes a master. Well, comedians are on stage more than anybody else. They take people through a range of emotions more so than anybody else. Let me see what I can get from them. It's a comedy show anyway, so it'll be pretty useful, and I don't want to be the unfunny, nervous guy with the shaking Stevens moves, and see what happens. So it went really well. We raised a good chunk of money, totally packed. And it went so well that the main comedian asked me, like literally like, hey Dave, do you want to open for me at the Punchline Comedy Club in a couple of weeks? And I was like, do I tell him that I got a clue? I was like, nah, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So I did it, and I'd just been reading, and he's an author, I'm sure he's been here at Google before, you might be familiar with his work. A.J. Jacobs is very much referenced in Tim Ferriss's books. He was known for going deep into a topic for a year and writing about it, and I read his books, and he'd just done the year of living biblically, where he'd literally, like, even though he was Jewish, followed the rules of the Bible to the letter of the law, like so much so he was out throwing stones at adulterers. It was pretty cool. I was like, right, maybe I'll keep this going for a year. Maybe I'll get a bit Tim Ferriss on it. I was very influenced by him breaking things down, 80-20 principle, trying to figure out what are the techniques that are most effective, and I'll do it for a full year. And I was like, well, I've just left a corporate job, and if I tell my friends I'm going to put all my effort into being a comedian for a year with actually no objective of being a full-time comedian and very little potential income from this choice for a year, they're going to think I am bonkers. So I was like, I better make up a stage name because I don't want people tagging me on Facebook doing all this comedy stuff, and I hate public speaking in the first place. So I got a bit carried away, and we came up with Irish Dave, was the comedian, and this kind of became the book, was my learning along the way. But yeah, I got very much carried away with this. Irish Dave doesn't sound like the most novel stage name to an Irish person, but Americans seem to like it for some reason. I was like, and I went as an accomplished comedian, so I was trying to make it known that I was already well versed in comedy because it's much easier to get booked in clubs and festivals that way. So this was one of the first shows I managed to get booked on. A real highlight, you can see. Estrogen entree with a side of balls. I got to be that side of balls. As you can see with all the ladies' names, a real proud moment for my parents. I can imagine, David, glad to see you've left your corporate job. When are you going back to one again, please, to become a side of balls? Loads and loads of festivals, loads of comedy clubs all over the US, and it wasn't all totally nutty. I learned a lot along the way. And some of the cooler ones, are any of you familiar with NPR's The Moth, the storytelling series, True Stories Told Live? So I was trying to get on any stage that would have me. So I went along, told a story, and I won. And then they're like, well, now you have to go on our biggest event that they produce worldwide is in San Francisco in the Castro Theater. So that little ant on stage is me. And there's 1,400 people there, and I am about to lay an egg. I am so nervous. And if you shook my hand beforehand, you'd feel like you'd been assaulted by a semi-defrosted mackerel. Like, bad. I was so nervous, but you wouldn't know if you were in the audience. So over a year of experiments, I'd learned enough to make it at least look like I was quite comfortable, where I very much was not on stage. And telling that story that night, I could never have predicted what would have happened. It set off a lot of really cool stuff that I'm going to tell you about by the end of this talk. So I just want to give you an overview, some of the things on the book that I learned along the way that I think you can replicate. And in the end, we'll get some questions going because I know there's loads around it. But I just wanted to focus on what were the techniques that I was using to do this along the way and what I saw from comedians. Because everyone I saw along the way in comedy, they didn't all get famous as comedians. In fact, very few of them did. But every single one of them got funnier along the way. They were very much showing that there was a process behind it. All of their writing got better. So there was certain techniques behind it. So if I said to you, you can become funnier, you'd be like, well, no, you're nuts. Or most of you today would be like, yeah, I'm funny enough as it is, which is what I got from the raise of hands. You're like, no, we're all fine in this department. But comedians over time, they all become better writers. So if I said to you, you can become a better writer, you'd say, well, of course, I just need to do a little bit every day. And that's effectively what they did. So over the course of the year, I guess there was really 3 key findings outside that. So I studied all the leading TED Talks, I studied all the most popular business talks, and we were trying to find trends for humor in there because no one had done it. And I was like, well, surely everybody says humor is a key part of talks, but is it? So sure enough, it was. All these top speakers were using humor. They were using the exact same techniques as comedians, even though a lot of them did not know it. And the nice thing for only the 4 people in here that weren't funny, you don't need to be a natural comedian to get laughs. I remember being at a comedy club out in Pleasanton, and we were sitting there, and this guy was literally the most boring dude I've ever met in my existence. Like, barely conversed with anybody, just sat there super awkward. And I was like, well, what, is it your first time coming to this comedy club? Like, are you enjoying it? He's like, no, I'm here all the time. It's like, oh, what? So yeah, I'm up next. I'm one of the comedians. It's like, oh, this is not going to end well for you. No, did your friends tell you to do this as a career? This is a really bad choice. No. He went on stage and absolutely crushed it. I mean, people were belly laughing. I would have bet my house on this guy not being funny, and he was amazing. And he was far from the only guy I saw this over a period of time. So people who weren't naturally funny, chatty, witty, or outgoing off stage were very funny on stage. And I was like, how are they doing this? What are they learning behind the scenes along the way? And why would you need to do this in a business setting, right? We're obviously here at Google today. A lot of you guys are giving business talks. Why do you care about this? Well, John Medina's work on this is all around brain science, but it's essentially the brain doesn't pay attention to boring things or dodgy accents. If you can't understand me or you don't like what I'm saying, you have your phone for company at any moment, and you will whip it out and let me know. Comedians, they say, are judged about every 12 seconds, and we're pretty much doing the same to business speakers these days, because you're like, I've got a computer in my pocket. I do not have to be listening to this fella who's boring me to pieces. Right? And they're never intentionally boring their audience to pieces. Nobody goes on stage to be boring. They just don't really know the techniques behind that can change it a bit. So infotainment, basically, all of a sudden, has become our means for getting information. So if you're competing with where people go for entertainment to advertise or get your content out there, whether it's public speaking or written content, then you these days have to become that entertainment. Because I'm just scrolling through it on Facebook, and if you're trying to get my attention there, I expect it to be some way engaging or entertaining. So do any of you guys watch the old school news anymore for news? Not so much. Does anyone get their news from somebody like this guy? Historically, right? I mean, that's the way we're getting information, with a punchline. Did anybody see on late night TV recently any political stuff? Annihilation of Donald Trump in one way by a comedian. They released some of President Obama's footage today, talking about his objections to the Republican candidates. It was basically stand-up comedy. It was amazing. The timing was there, the principles were there, everything. And most of the time he has comedy writers writing his talk. That's why they're really good. Obviously he has to get good at delivering them, and he has some huge natural skill there. But a lot of people will say, well, humor isn't appropriate in my job. If the president's using humor, you're probably going to be okay. Right? So you can replicate these techniques. Anyone familiar with Seth Godin's work? Very, very leading marketer, author, and blogger, you name it. His talks are so good that even TED themselves describe them as funny. They're not my words, they're from TED's description of his talk, right? And they're really, really funny. When you actually analyze his TED Talks, you get 3.4 laughs per minute. And that won't mean a lot to you as a metric until we compare them to the 3 funniest movies of all time. So if I wanted to get laughs per minute, I would be better off listening to a business talk and watching it than I would be the funniest movies ever made, which is totally insane when you think about it. Now, we're in Google. I know there's some good statistics heads in the room here. You'll be like, well, it's a longer period in a movie. It's harder to sustain a consistent level of laughs with a story arc. Absolutely. I belly laughed during The Hangover. I didn't belly laugh during the TED Talk. Absolutely. But if you wanted just to laugh on a laughs per minute basis and get some good laughs in, you're better off watching a lot of TED Talks these days. And his talk was by no means alone. The good news for us as people who are trying to pull something out of these techniques is that 58% of his laughs in that talk came from using funny images. So if you're like, I can't be a comedian, and I'm not telling anybody in this room to be a comedian, I'm just saying there's a lot we can use and learn from the techniques that they use. Using funny images, stuff that you know is socially proven and funny already, and just sticking it into your presentation is one of the easiest ways ever to get laughs. And these guys are using it at the very highest level in TED Talks. But it gets treated very much like a joke. So a joke is always a setup to something and the funny bit. So a lot of business speakers will put the image up there and just go, look at that. It's funny, isn't it? It gets a little bit of a laugh, but if you build up that image, like everything, the frustration I felt that moment can all be described by this one image. And it's just something crazy, always a big laugh. And you literally just treat the funny image or the content you have as the joke. You're not the one delivering the joke. You just build up anticipation to it. So the cool thing when we go into this and we link the techniques he's using and the techniques that a lot of TED Talks are using, every single one of the top 10 TED Talks at the moment has humor in them. Every one of them moves the needle on humor. And some of them at levels that rival a stand-up comedian. And many of them at levels that are higher than the funniest talks of all time. So there's a bunch of them interchanged. These are researchers. These are not stand-up comedians. From Sir Ken Robinson, the most viewed TED Talk of all time. literally to Sean Asher, a Harvard researcher, one of the funniest TED Talks you'll ever watch. I think it's the 11th most viewed of all time at the moment. Does anybody know Mary Roach's talk, particularly about female orgasm? Any guys in the room know that one? Not one of you? Just one of you, smartest man in the room. This is a very good time to say, I know that talk, I love that talk. Actually, I start every day with that talk. That's how I prepare for life. You'll be a very popular man in the dating cycle. List that as your most common interest. I like soccer and Mary Roach's talk about orgasm. You will see the online dating spike come pretty quickly. But the proof is there when you go through all these, and we were correlating them, they're all funny. They're all entertainment. And TED themselves are called technology, entertainment, and design. That entertainment level is there. My argument was this, that it's just getting higher and higher. And if you're a speaker in any way, and you go on after one of these really funny folks, you're going to know all about it if you're not able to reproduce some of those contexts. So like nobody wants to go on. Anybody had that happen in a conference where you go on after the really funny speaker? And you're like, oh no. You see them crushing it and you're like, oh no. Oh, I don't want to go next. How do I do that? I mean, the thing is you can if you know some of the techniques behind it. So what I'm going to give you a little overview is very much 80-20. So what was I doing fast? How was I trying to break it down? Again, very influenced by trying to find the 20% of the things I could do that would give me 80% of the results in the fastest time possible. So starting with a story was pretty much the basis for me doing this. So, and that was for a number of reasons, but if you're public speaking in any way and you're not using stories, well then you're not memorable in any way, because I cannot recall the information you've just given me as a bunch of numbers, facts, and figures. If I tell you a story about the customer problem, the solution I've solved, whatever acquisition it was, whatever challenge that you're working on, now my mind can actually process and remember that. And if you're public speaking and no one can remember what you said, then were you even there in the first place? I am today because I'm on video somewhere, but most of the time you don't leave as much of a trail. So it's very important to deliver your information in a memorable way. We know our mind works like that. So I don't know how we have for Spanish speakers in the room. Any Spanish speakers? You know, the word for to put in Spanish is caber, right? And if I'm trying to teach someone that word, there's a lot of non-speakers, most of you guys. Sí, señor. All right, nicely done. I don't want to have an Irish person trying to speak Spanish in here. Never going to end well. But if I'm trying to teach you that word just as a word, nearly impossible to remember, literally by itself, and to recall. But if I give you some context around that, and we break it up in a way that your mind's able to remember it. So this example I've taken from Benny Lewis, who's an Irishman who speaks 12 languages, and he's the first one since James Joyce to do that. So he's probably worth listening to. And his stuff is really good around the topic. But literally we take the word caber to fit and we make up a crazy story around it. So we literally picture a yellow New York taxi car pulling over on the side of the street, and then we picture a big hairy bear trying to get in the window of the taxi cab because he doesn't know how to work a door, and his bottom is sticking out the window, hairy bottom in the wind, and the taxi driver's going crazy. And maybe he's from somewhere in Russia or somewhere Eastern European. He's like, hey bear, get out of taxi cab, you cannot fit in taxi. It's a very bad accent, to be honest, but it's the best I'm going to be able to do for the moment. And right, you're like, the bear does not fit in the cab. Caber is the word for to fit. And if I ask you that ever again, what's the word for to fit in Spanish, you will know it. You won't know it instantly, but it will take you 1 to 2 seconds to put the story together in your head. So what we want to do, in trying to be funny in any way or trying to be memorable, remember this and the book and the objective is not to be funny, it's to be engaging. And to be the easiest way to be engaging is to go for fun before funny and use your own personal stories because they're unique to you. So anyone say, oh, I tell a joke. You know the moment your boss calls you in, he's like, hey, I got a good joke for you. You're just like, I know it's not going to be funny. Like I know based on historically you just make a decision, you see the joke coming and you've assumed it's either going to be funny or unfunny. But there was a moment where you had a chance to get off the bus or get out of the office and go, I need to get away from this. This is going to be bad. Right? The nice thing when you're telling a story is everybody loves a story. We've never had those moments in life where we're like, shut up telling me that story. I hate stories. Right? Nobody does. Your mind is just naturally wired to appreciate them. So if I'm trying to be funny in any way, shape, or form, and I do it in the form of a story that just happens to be funny, there's no risk anymore to not being funny. What happens if you don't laugh at my story? I just told you a story. No downside. More exciting than your pie chart or your graph or your list of facts and figures, and more engaging. And now if we can find out a sneaky structure to make that story funny, now is where we use some comedic techniques. The nice thing about your stories are extremely unique, personable to your own style, and literally can't be copied by anyone else. They're yours. And the really nice thing with public speaking, for the nervous public speakers out there, when you're telling your story, your own stuff, and you screw it up, and you say something wrong or you leave out something, what happens? Nothing. Nobody knows whatsoever that you just messed up your own story. You're the only person that knows that content. And you don't have to stick with your stories. You can draw on things that you really like around. But if it's your stories, ultimately your audience wants to know a little bit about you, and your stories make it cool. They get to know you a bit, right? They get to feel for you, and they get to relate to you in a little bit way. The most powerful thing you can ever do with storytelling is to allow the listener to see themselves within your story. So if you do that in any way, shape, or form, you're already creating a memory that they're like, oh yeah, I remember, I felt something during that talk. So we're literally, when we're trying to be funny fast, 80-20 principle style, we take a list of our stories and we put them through comedy writing techniques. So if I say to you now, tell me a funny story, you'll be like, no. And that's what everyone, even a comedian, someone is performing a storyteller, tell me a funny story right now. Automatically mine goes blank. I got nothing. And honestly, if I ask you, tell me a funny story, do you have anything in life? Most of you will be like, I don't know. What comedians and performers are amazing at doing is literally keeping a list on a smartphone or device that's like a funny story file, and every time they see anything remotely funny, they're like, shut up, stop, I need to make a note of this. And they do. And every time they listen to a podcast or NPR, Snap Judgment, a storytelling series, every time they see a stand-up comedian and it jogs a memory in their mind, they write it down. And all of a sudden you have a mountain of material from your own life that's highly personable to you, that's more engaging than the average little factoid. And you can link those and literally build your own presentations around them. And that's what we were seeing in the most successful talks when we were studying, that these guys were shoehorning stories they like to tell just and linking it to business topics. Right? And you'll always say, I'm not sure there's a way to do that. And in the book, I listed all sorts of ways to do that. But any story about anything that you think is not appropriate, you can link that to work. Absolutely no problem. So we were taking these lists of stories that everybody thinks they don't have. At the moment, are you still like, oh, I don't know, I got nothing funny? Most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you? First date you ever went on? First blind date you ever went on? Strange Skype call with your parents where they drove you crazy, trying to teach them how to work Skype or trying to turn on the video? Inappropriate text messages you received by accident from your friends, or when somebody just had to retype, the respell, the autocorrect on there, do it for them? Right? That time you tried to learn a new language and you said the wrong word and it didn't end so well. First day at work. Strangest customer you ever came across. All of a sudden you're kind of like, okay, yeah, no, I definitely have stories. And they're the coolest stories because they're relatable. So if I tell you a great story about me being in China, you're like, that's great, I don't care. Unless you've been to China or you're Chinese or you're interested in it, I need to give you a reason to get on board, right? That you relate to in a way. So an opening setup becomes very important to allow you to tell a story. So if I tell you a story about China, don't care. But if I can make that relatable to you in a way that you all go, okay, so if I'm like, being in a new place can be challenging. Being in a new place can be uncomfortable. This time I was in China. Now your opening statement was appealing to the whole room. You didn't shut everybody off, right? And you're very much not just trying to be Jerry Seinfeld or something by making a comment that's kind of controversial, or Louis C.K., and be like, Oakland is a crazy place. And then people are like, oh no, from Oakland in the room, you just lost half the room. And what comedians will do with their skill is they'll bring that back and everybody laughs in the end, it's all happy. We as business speakers are not going to be doing that whatsoever. Stay away from it. We just tell stories. There's no strong opinions in them. You have no chance of running the risk, and that way there's no nervousness when you're using it in a business environment. And to do that, we literally put it through a structure that comedians use all the time. So the reason to tell the story, what's the key funny part in the story, and then any other little lines afterwards that are kind of engaging or funny that you can say. So a comedic delivery can always be refined to a setup, the punchline, which is the funny part of your joke, and then a tagline. And comedians will literally force themselves to be really concise. Business speakers, not so much. All right? Comedians are losing people every 12 seconds, so they get very good at delivering that content very fast. And obviously for a business audience with these techniques, in any way or anyone speaking, you don't have an unscheduled amount of time. You got to be pretty tight in your content. But again, we're going to take that and we're going to rewrite your story to delay the funny component in your story. Have you ever seen somebody getting a laugh on a business stage and then the whole audience laughs and they keep talking and then the whole audience stops all of a sudden to listen to them? Why? There's a really cool expression that's called the end of laughter is followed by the height of listening. So the most attentive your mind will ever be is that moment after you've laughed, because you're like, give me more of that. Compared to your average business conference you've been to, you're like, oh my God, wait, was that funny? That was good. I want more. I need more of that. And you get really, really attentive to the next words. So comedic performers and comedic copywriters and anyone who's good, do you ever see somebody on stage and you're like, his delivery was amazing. He was really good timing. Comedians, you're like, that was really good. President Obama's, the video today that I watched, everyone, all the comments, timing was amazing. But you can impact that timing by taking out the funny bit and sticking it at the end of the sentence. Literally, what's the funny word and how do I hide that till the end? And if you say the funny word last, second to last 2 or 3 words, then you just stop and you allow people to react. If it's your story, you know more or less where they're going to react. You've told it to your family before. If you had to force it to one key element, what would it be? You kind of know that people might laugh or respond on this. And now you literally go out of your way to structure the sentence so the key word is at the end. And when the key word is at the end, you just kind of sit back and you're like, yeah. And you let people allow that time to react. And when that happens, everyone goes away and they're like, his timing was really good. I wanted to show you a great example of this, and it was from President Obama himself in Congress delivering it. But it's very hard to get the copyright permission to show you that video. So what I've done is I've basically convinced a friend of mine to recreate it for you. And we're going to watch a very low quality, low budget production that took approximately 46 seconds to put together. And you're going to notice that in this, President Obama, well, to be honest and frankly truthful, he's Indian in this. And we figured, well, with the growth of tech and the demand for programmers and Fremont, it's only a matter of time before you have an Indian president anyway, so you should be comfortable with that. That's fine? Good. So just have a look at this. But this is the actual words that he said in Congress that day, and just pay attention for how good the timing is going to look. Very high budget.
And then there's my favorite example. The Interior Department is in charge of salmon while they're in freshwater, but the Commerce Department handles them when they're in saltwater. I hear it gets even more complicated once they're smoked.
All right, completely terrible with awkward look at the end there. That's my friend Richard. He is a programmer at Yahoo, but he's also a very, 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 very funny comedian. But unfortunately, we had to work with the actual words in that because we wanted to recreate it accurately for you guys. But you notice the word smoked is really gone out of his way to put it as the last word. And when you look up that video for yourselves, the actual real video of it, you'll see President Obama just kind of kicking back because he knows what's going to happen. They're going to laugh. And if I said, right, the text was, and when they're smoked, it's even more crazy, or when they're smoked, it's even more insane, or when they're smoked, something. Once I say the word smoked, you know it's a joke. You start to laugh. I keep talking. You stop laughing, and you start listening again. So I've actually stopped the laughter. So my timing looks really bad. So it's just one little sneaky hack you guys can use yourself to recreate it. Find the key part in the story and place it at the end. Leave it as a surprise. A really key thing in comedy, which is tough for me to talk about as an Irish person because we're not very good at saying the number 3. Every time, in fact, we say 3, it doesn't really come out like it should and sounds a bit strange. But the rule of 3, if any of you know it or any of you have copywriting positions here in any way or watching, the rule of 3 is at the heart of everything memorable you've ever been subjected to in any marketing or copywriting material, because 3 is the smallest amount of numbers your brain can recognize as a sequence or pattern. So if I give you 1, 2, you're always expecting 3. And I remember when I looked at this first, I remember when I used to box when I was in college or back before college, it was always 1, 2, right. And you'd always hit them with that, left, left, right, because they weren't expecting the right. And that was the sequence that you were always trained to punch in. It was 1, 2, and you automatically expect the third one to come from the same direction. Comedy is extremely similar. It's always that 1, 2, 3. And in comedy, 3 is funny because 3 is actually 4. So a joke is always 1, 2. You think 3 is coming, but it's not. It's 4. It's a flip of expectations. So to describe it is very much like a train coming down the tracks. With the first 2 elements in the sequence, I'm trying to create a picture and let you think you know where it's going. And your laughter will come when I derail or flip that expectation. So literally just changing the last word in that sequence will make it kind of funny. It might not be viral hilarity by any means, but it will be more engaging, whether it's copyright, whether it's your own Facebook updates, whether it's for Twitter, or whether it's for public speaking. Any information in sequence of 3 is more memorable, and it's also more shocking to your mind when the third element in that is a flip and it changes the expectation. So just, I mean, this is a really good graphic that shows how central the rule of tree is to everything that we're doing, from all the campaigns and slogans you've been subjected to marketing copy that you're like, oh, I recognize that, to the strikes and the sporting systems we go through in all the sports you watch. You remember Snap, Crackle, and Pop in the world of cereal when you're a kid, or the Three Little Bears, or like, why was it always tree? There was always tree of these items, right? For its to primary colors, to literature, and to company names, to TED themselves. And these names are not tree words by mistake. They're tree words very intentionally. Obviously here, Google just went, nah, Google, fine. Right? But a lot of these companies were not as creative in that endeavor, and they're playing on the same mind pattern of recognition for you to remember that. Now here's a good example I didn't have to go too far to find. It's down from the Tenderloin in San Francisco. Some of you will be worried about what I'm about to show. Don't worry. So just a sign outside a bar. Not amazingly funny, but you're like, oh, that's kind of funny. Right, and you can replicate this sequence in any way. We used to do it to sell tickets for events we were doing. We're like, buy your tickets now and get a free drone, a Tesla, and false advertising. And they're all like, haha, buy ticket. Right, it works. A little spike of dopamine gets you a bit happier, and it's a little bit of a laugh that wasn't hard to get. What happens if I change that sequence? So that's very much 1, 2, 4. I mean, that's the best example of it there. 1 and 2, logical sequence. I think I know what's coming. 4, flip of expectation. So the third element essentially becomes a 4, just to throw you off a little bit and not be able to recognize the pattern. What happens if I move false advertising there and change the sequence? Not funny anymore, not even mildly entertaining. So it's funny, I mean, you can use this anywhere. Once you start familiar and start minding to use this, so this is the back of my book, right? And not much entertainment value traditionally to the back of a book. Normally you have a couple of blurbs from famous people going, oh my God, book's so amazing, read it, whatever. You don't pay attention to it. We use it as an opportunity for humor. So 1 and 2 there, very much normal. 3, this book is great. I haven't read it yet, but David drew a picture when he was 6 years old of a penguin drinking beer in a Chinese restaurant. And it was clear the potential for slight wisdom and misguided creativity were there. Marita Nihill, David's mother. Is that unusual all of a sudden? Now you're thinking my mom's kind of cool, and to be honest, she is. She's pretty funny if I inherited any of that. You guys are already funny already, so you got lucky as well. But 1, 2, 4, right? So your mind's just logically processing information, and it comes as a little bit of a shock that you've broke the pattern, right? And there's that opportunity in everything. At the end of emails you send, in subject lines for emails, and auto sign, anything we have squeezed humor into places where you don't expect it. And if you're worrying how to sequence it, it's always that structure of tree. So I want to show you a quick example. This is from a comedy club. I wrote this joke. It is terrible. It is the worst joke ever. I'm embarrassed to even show it to you. Even my own friends are like, oh, no, don't be telling that joke again. But I wrote it with this sequence in mind. So I'm like, if I sit down to take a story from my life and write it in a joke format, and I go and tell it in a comedy club or on any stage, and then I go to another one, and I tell the same one, can it become predictable? Can it be repeatable? And what effect will it have on people? And what I'd like you to note is just the structure of how I do it. Has he hid the last word until the end or not? And you might not think it's funny, you probably won't, and I'll have to explain why I think it's mildly funny after, but just note the audience's reaction, and apologies again for this joke because it's really terrible.
I don't know a lot about California, I must admit, but does anybody else have this problem? Guys, you're going to have with your girlfriend. She's always on you to go to Napa. Oh, I want to go to Napa. I want to go to Napa. So I gave in, I was sick of listening to it. I said, all right, and I finally brought her. And it turns out she doesn't even like auto parts. Auto parts. Doesn't even like auto parts. Auto parts. Auto parts.
So totally terrible. I did apologize. For those of you who don't get it, and of course if you're not familiar with here in the Bay Area, you might not. Napa, famous wine region. When I mention the word Napa, girls are automatically like, oh, that warm day, I had my nice dress on, I can nearly taste the wine, oh, I really like Napa. And maybe they've even grabbed a memory already of when they were last there. A lot of guys will be like, oh, that time I got dragged to Napa. I'm sick of going with my girlfriend there all the time. But all of a sudden you're painting a picture of a place that's very much not what I'm talking about in that joke. So it's a rubbish joke, but Napa, of course, is also a chain of automotive service stores where you go to get the oil in your car changed. Not a good place to bring somebody on a date. Even if you are watching that talk all the time about the female orgasm, you still won't get away from bringing the lady to the oil parts place. So that's the flip in expectations. So you're like, why is this thing humorous? If I wrote it out, it doesn't seem that funny, but very much the last word is at the end of the sequence. And that's what brings it to life a little bit. Sounds totally crazy, but in its simplistic form, that can be recreated and can be used for all content that you're crafting, whether it's on the back of a book. I just like that cat, and that's why I put him up there for no apparent reason. But a lot of stuff around public speaking that I have in the book, a lot of it is tips on the actual delivery yourself, but I wanted to talk to you about the content side of it at the start, how to craft it, just so you have a bunch of cool material that you feel, okay, I have an embarrassing story, or I have a crazy client story, or I have a customer story, because we wouldn't be in business if we weren't solving some sort of problem. So you're like, who was the person I was solving it for? Now tell me about them a little bit. Right? That's your story to start with. So a lot of pitches, and you'll have heard before where they go in, they're just numbers, 80% year-on-year growth rate, whatever, traction. Brian, my partner, pivoted, refinanced Series B. You're like, what are they talking about? Totally lost. Start with a story, and then the numbers become the icing on the cake. So once you give people something to latch onto and remember, you're good. A little bit of a shared experience if you can, so they can see themselves within your story and understand the pain point you're solving in any way or what you're trying to communicate, and then all the numbers come. And guess what? If you're pitching with numbers, the same thing as comedic effect and timing. If your company is getting an 80% year-on-year growth rate, it's much more impactful if I say we have a year-on-year growth rate of 80%. The impactful word gets moved to the end of the sentence. And it doesn't sound as natural to say, but with a tiny bit of practice, it feels all right, and it sounds totally natural to your audience. But I'd love to take some questions from you guys as to, there's all the stuff around the delivery. Obviously, I pretended to be a comedian for a year. That probably threw up a couple of wacky things. I mean, the book is very much my story, what happened with all this stuff, and then how to replicate it and how to do it, but using comedians' techniques to do it. So what are comedians so good at doing on stage that the average business speakers don't learn because they're not clocking up 10,000 hours on stage? So is there anything you could do or replicate? So I'd love if any of you guys have questions. We do have a microphone. Was there one, I guess, I got asked quite a bit. Does anyone fear going blank on stage? Has that ever popped up for anyone? I see a lot of head nods. I think the single biggest thing I learned in the whole year, I learned from Richard, actually, our fake Indian President Obama, and you had in the video there in the low budget recording, but he taught me about something called the memory palace, which I hadn't heard of or I wasn't aware of, which you might have. Joshua Foer wrote a very good book on it called Moonwalking with Einstein, which essentially is a way to remember your talk or anything you need to remember and never worry about forgetting it in any way, shape, or form. So do you guys, you didn't speak Spanish earlier, you remembered the word for to put, or to fit, I should say? Yeah, caber, nearly everybody, pretty much everybody. Can't test the guys on the live streaming side of it, but you won't forget that story. That's just the way you wrapped it. And it even gets more powerful of a memory if you take that story and you put it in a specific location. So if I ask you guys, have you got a favorite restaurant? Do you like in San Francisco or the Bay Area? And picture it and be like, when I walk in, where's the server? How many tables are there? Where's the bathroom? It's very easy for that to come to your mind. And you're like, oh no, there's like 6 tables on the left, the server's on the right. Okay, I get it. So if you take a space like that you remember easily, now make it something super familiar, like your house or your office or somewhere where you grew up in, and you plant all these little stories as memories within that structure. All of a sudden now you're never trying to remember a word, you're trying to remember a location. So you're on stage and you're literally like, where am I in the talk? I'm in the kitchen. Who's in the kitchen? Okay, those crazy memories I planted there as a story. So if I'm giving a talk about, say, Mexico and economic growth, and I need to remember the GDP of Mexico is 11%, I'm literally going to picture a Mexican guy. I open my door, and there's a guy from Mexico on a donkey, and he's got no pants on whatsoever, and he has a bottle of Guinness in each hand for no reason whatsoever, and he has a soccer jersey on him, and 11 is the number on the jersey. So the first thing I need to talk about is in my talk, I open the door, I'm starting to talk about Mexico. So it becomes, I hope I have the image of it. Oh yeah, so remember the story I told you? I told it at NPR for the Moth for 1,400 people. And that's all I had. in my back pocket, and it stays in my back pocket. I never take it out in any way, because if you have any notes, people automatically assume that you didn't prepare for this, whether you want them to get that idea or not. And that's all I have. And you'll be looking at that thinking, that's a bit of a strange story. What are those notes? Potatoes, 69, cookies, fireworks, Lululemon pants. It was about my mother coming to San Francisco as a conservative kind of Irish lady and getting a lot less conservative and going home wearing like Lululemon pants and getting a bit of a taste for weed cookies, which was pretty interesting to say the least. But all I've done is I've positioned a little story in every location in my room. And the nice thing is when you're doing your talk now, you're not looking at a list of bullet points anymore and trying to remember them. And the really cool thing is when you do this and you realize, okay, this works, I actually can't forget this stuff anymore, then you can sit in the audience and watch the 3 speakers before you. So have you ever been to a conference or done public speaking and someone went on and they talked about the exact same thing that the last guy talked about? And you're sitting there going, why is he saying this? Why doesn't he argue with the last guy's point? Or why is he saying the same thing? And the answer is normally because he was backstage sweating, reading off a load of notes, and he wasn't totally confident that he was going to remember it. And the easiest way you'll ever get laughs, if the really funny guy goes on before you, then you just talk about how funny he was. And you make the same jokes that he did. And in comedy, they call that a callback, and you just use something that already worked. But when you know you're not going to go blank on stage, the shaking and the sweating calms down a lot before you go on, because you're like, all right, the biggest single fear, I've just taken that off the table. And this works 100% of the time. I've never gone blank using this. Any of my friends that have used this have never gone blank using it. So it's a big topic by itself, but to be honest, that's it. Just draw out a floor plan and create a little memory of something, put it in each place, and that's your talk. And when you get really good at doing your talk, if you ever spoke at a conference, some of you might relate to this, where it's a 25-minute talk, and they're like, actually, just before you go on, everybody else ran over a bit. If you could just do 11 minutes, that would be fine. You're like, 11 minutes? I've got like 50 slides. What am I going to do? When you get really good at doing this, you know how long you're going to have to spend in each room. So I know if I go into the bathroom and I'm talking about the intellectual capital of California, that is Stockton, for you guys there, that's literally going to take me a minute. So I'm like, all right, I'm not going into the bathroom. I'm going to walk straight through the kitchen. That's going to take another 2 minutes off the time. And all of a sudden, you become very, very flexible with what you're doing. So I'd say of all the tips and the takeaways I got for the world of business or any form of public speaking, this is #1 for me, because it allowed me to relax quite a lot. Still nervous beforehand, still sweating, but got better about managing it. And I knew like the ultimate fear was gone. Like me just standing there and be like, what do I do? All of a sudden you get a lot more comfortable. There was loads of little tips like that along the way that I was getting from performers and comedians that I'd never ever seen in the world of business. So any other kind of wacky questions?
You did that by drawing it out?
Yeah, definitely.
Putting yourself in the space?
I draw it out just to help me, but I literally sit down and visualize myself walking through the house. And the crazier the stories I can cut, kind of like the bear in the taxi cab, and give it the extra detail, who's the person, put some celebrities in there, anything. The crazier that story becomes that you create for each bullet point. And then I just draw it out, just as literally something to visualize that morning. And to be honest, once maybe I'll run through the talk and fast forward. And if I can't say the word really fast, I definitely can't say it really slow. So it's a really good thing that someone taught me. Like, you know, when you put a quote in a presentation, you're like, now I'd like to share a quote. And you're like, I can't even remember what the quote is because it's not as familiar as you thought it would be to you. And you can't say it really fast. You can't say it fast, you can't say it slow. I think that was one of the better tips somebody gave me. Someone also said along the way, you know, filler words. Irish people are great for mumbling. No offense, Irish people who are watching, but we definitely do it. And it's why I have a hard time sometimes with foreign languages of sounding like a native speaker when I'm studying them. But the filler words that you use, like but, anyone ever have problems with that when you're public speaking? It's all those that you watch it back and you're like, oh, I said so many times. But if you speak literally like I am now, 10% to 15% higher than normal, it sounds totally normal to you guys. I feel like a lunatic, but it looks really, really natural. And you know what happens? It's nearly impossible to say really loudly. You just don't. And all of a sudden the words come slower because you're talking faster and there isn't a single filler word. And you've just cured that problem as well straight away. Got that from comedians as well. All these little things they were doing that I was thinking business speakers had never heard of. Like coming out to a crowd and just get them to applaud for anything. Have you ever been in a comedy club and they're like, give it up for your bar and wait staff? And you're like, they're charging me so much money for drinks, they don't even come. And then when the comedian tries to talk, they talk over him. I don't want to applaud for them, but you do. Give it up for yourselves for coming out to support live comedy tonight. Sound familiar? Now give it up for all the great comedians you're about to hear. The rule of three, the same law that applies to copywriting, applies to your behavior. If you do something 3 times like clap, you're more likely to do it again later in the show. So if they walk out and it's a totally flat audience, what they do is just ask them for a round of applause. Just get them to do something. Comedians, again, amazing at doing it. Introductions, when you're introducing a speaker, and that was his point. Do you ever have someone see them coming to a stage and be like, John is a friend of mine. John's our next speaker. He was an early stage investor in his company. And every time he says the word John, you're like, do we applaud now? No. Okay. Said the name again. Do we applaud now? No. A comedy club. Ladies and gentlemen, our next comedian has been on at the Punchline. You've seen him in the Improv. You've seen him on Comedy Central. He's huge. Please give it up for. And use the audience like, who is it? That's the only thing you want to know. The anticipation is building to what's now the punchline. It's the same structure. And when I say that guy's name, now he gets a big round of applause all of a sudden, in unison from everybody at the same time. Small little things like that have a huge impact on what's going to happen. I saw a question from yourself, was it? All the way, did you have one still or no? Finito? Yeah, same as don't end on the questions and answers. Have you ever seen that? Or anyone do a Q&A session where you're literally standing up there and the guy comes back to host? Similar, although he's doing it much better. And is literally like, anyone got any questions? Nobody? And you're just standing there as the speaker going, oh my God, I hope somebody asks a question at some stage now soon. And then he'll be like, oh, guy in the back, like I just did. And the guy's like, no, it wasn't me. Just gone straight away. No intention of asking a question. Don't want to. And then the speaker, they kind of go off stage like this. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye. And like the conference organ now has to go back in and try and edit that video and make it look like they didn't go out on the flattest note in history. So literally you can change all that. A comedian would never go out like that. It's the Steve Jobs strong ending for a comedian. Second strongest joke at the start, strongest joke at the finish, out with a bang. Everybody knows it's over. And as a business speaker, all you have to do is say, I'm going to take a few questions and answers before making my conclusion. And if nobody asks a question, who cares? I still have a slide which is going to have how many takeaways on it that you're going to remember? 3. Still cannot pronounce that word, but now, now I control the ending. So all of a sudden, I know it's going to end. All of a sudden, you know it's over. All of a sudden, the host can say, round of applause. You guys give it. Everybody's happy. Makes a massive difference. Next time you go to conference, you're going to see that. They're going to be running around with the mic. Nobody's saying anything. The speaker's just standing there on stage looking totally mortified. And because you can't control that, you're leaving it up to random chance. So good tip as well. Anything else? Yeah, please. We'll get you a microphone just so they can all hear it. So yeah, I better turn off my little potato picture for a moment.
Thank you for coming to talk to us today.
Oh, thank you.
I was wondering how long it took you to stop feeling nervous on stage. You said that you did this for like a year.
Yeah, more than a year now. Never. And I wish someone had told me that to start. I was like, when does it get good? No. And I'd do these comedy shows, and you think a green room backstage to a comedy show, they're like 10 comedians are in there. It must be so fun in there. Not fun whatsoever. Never. Everyone's super nervous, like they're getting ready, they're doing their own way of preparation, they're still sweating and shaking a lot of the time. If there's consequences, you're always nervous. And it was just reframing that to say, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. And this is what happens. Nobody's trying to kill me on a daily basis anymore, so that fight or flight moment doesn't really happen. It happens with little things like public speaking, or it happens with like a road rage incident that leads to nothing. Like it's non-threatening things where we get that, and you do get it for public speaking. It doesn't go away. It becomes manageable. But reframing that in your head, that makes all the difference. You're like, oh, I'm sweating. This always happens. Okay, I'm perfectly prepared. So if you get it in your head like, right, if I was an IndyCar race car driver and I'm in the final and it's a championship decider, would it be a good idea if I took a shot of vodka just before I drove the car, a shot of tequila to null the senses? It would be terrible. Public speaking is the same. Like if something happens in a room, you want to react to it straight away and you're at your most heightened state, that's your best condition when the heartbeat is going. But you do little things like wear clothing you know is kind of sweat proof so it doesn't show it if you're getting sweaty. If there's a microphone in the stand, I would never take it out for the first 30 seconds because I know I'm going to be shaking so much. But the nice thing is if I'm relying on my stories and my content, that's what I'm using in my talk. And I start with a story, then I'm not going to forget it. It's mine. And if I mess it up, you don't know anyway. So I get way more comfortable about what I'm about to talk about. And if I have all that stuff memorized that we were talking about earlier, and I know the logical sequence, and I know I have 1 or 2 things that will 100% get people to laugh, or I know I can just show a video, and the video is going to make them laugh, or a couple of memes, and you get really comfortable pretty quick. So to answer your question, you know, it never goes away, and I wish people just said that all the time and admitted to it. But if you reframe it, then it gets pretty easy to deal with. So one more question if we have one, otherwise I'll just finish it up. Yeah?
So just one of your thoughts about the choice of a story. If you're talking about something, it's not exactly public, but we have a lot of things that are like, you use 10 people, how you're designing this component of a software system, or how you're marketing, or some in between. You'd never do a TED talk.
No, true,
like that,
true.
Right? It's all that's really. But you don't tell a story about your child. It has no relation whatsoever. So.
Well, I mean, sometimes it does, but that's kind of a different form because it's a bit more personal. There's 5 or 10 of you in the room. But why are you making this change? So there was a really good example with Skype when they launched the video conferencing component of Skype. Most of the staff were against it. They're like, that's not our core component. So the CEO brought into their weekly meetings that they were doing at the time customers who were literally the people that were using this. And the guy'd come in and he's like, listen, I was in the military for 6 months, and the only way I kept my relationship together with my wife was by using the video technology component. We have to roll out this beta. So if you weren't able to tell the story of the user's problem you were trying to solve, they were actually bringing in these people and sitting them. So I think you just vocalize who is the end user that your problem is affecting. Where you guys, you always have an end user. So your opinion is not as strong a way of motivation people as the story. Why does it affect those person? What was the frustration in it for them if we don't fix this? Vocalize that, now hit them with a few solutions. Yeah, it tends to work. But yeah, I better tell you guys the end of all this lunacy for me. And the nice thing for it, remember the sign earlier, the sequence of tree? This is rubbish. You can nearly feel the frustration in this sign as you read it. You're like, I've tried comedy, but it's not working. Right? Roses are red, bacon is red, poems are hard, bacon. It's exactly like they just gave up on the process, but it's still kind of funny, right? If you try to be funny ever and it doesn't get a laugh, all you have to do is acknowledge how terrible it was and everybody's cool, right? It's that guy who thinks he's amazing at public speaking or doing something in front of an audience and you're like, wow, he sucks. That's when you're not liking it. But as long as they're like, that joke was terrible, wasn't it? I'll never try that again. Okay, good. We remember that. It was funny last night when I was practicing my cat. Did not translate to the main stage today. Cool, then everybody's still happy with it, right? And I mean, the nice thing behind it, I love this metric, and I love the little cute baby photo, obviously, as well. But we used to laugh 300 times a day, and now they reckon it's somewhere about 15, depending on the age bracket, 15 to 20. It's like anybody who can stick in a little bit of laughter there quickly becomes a bit of a hero. And like the average conference is not the most difficult audience. The average conference speaker is horrendous. Like they're literally like a group of happy dolphins when you bring in humor going backwards. Like, oh, that was so great. My day just got much better. That was a book I wrote about it, and there's loads of tips in there, huge amount of tips. But if you don't want to buy it, you can get those tips for free totally just by going to 7 Comedy Habits, 80 tips, and download them all. So I'm like, literally, I'm not writing this book to write 10 books or become an expert on public speaking. I hate public speaking. It took a lot of arm twisting even to get me on video and doing this one and coming today, because I normally don't like to be on video either. So I still like public speaking. I don't want to be going around doing it. But if you want to get in touch, that's me. I'll put that up again in a sec. I didn't want to leave you hanging. Remember the story? I was telling for 1,400 people and nearly laying an egg on stage. And I was trying to tell you guys, you never know what will happen when you told your story. So that was pretty much the conclusion of my public speaking experiments. I did this big storytelling competition, and I went early on in the night. There was 10 storytellers, and I was winning all the way, right to the end. And my friends were like, you're going to win. And I was thinking it'd be a good end to the book, this one, if I win. And then the very last lady went and won, beat me like point something. And I was like, ah, there goes the happy ending. And then 2 weeks later, this guy contacted me that was the manager of a very famous comedian, but was also the producer of TEDx Marin, one of the bigger high-profile TED events here. And he's like, hey, David, would you like to come and tell a story or do a talk at our TED event? And I was thinking, that's quite a twist for someone who hated public speaking. That's pretty cool, actually. And then before I got carried away, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I have a friend, and he's the reason I got into all this stuff when he suffered his spinal cord injury. And he just did a talk, and I helped him craft it, and he gave it, and he went on after Guy Kawasaki with like his first talk ever and crushed it. And his second talk ever, he used the techniques I used, the memory palace there that I taught him, and he got written up in Forbes about it. And I was like, let me send you his video. I think you'll like it. And the guy watched it, and he wrote back to me. He's like, awesome, book, done. If you don't mind, we'll put him on. I was like, no, man, put him on. That's going to be epic. So he went, he gave that TED talk, and that's me and him on stage at it. I was watching backstage. He was the very last speaker. He got a 51-second standing ovation, telling them about the case of spinal cord injury. The talk is called Little Big Steps, and literally, like, my mother has all her old lady group in Ireland watch it for motivational reasons because it's unbelievably cool. And at the end of it, he actually stands on his own 2 feet to tell the story of how he trained himself to be able to stand up again, even though he was told he never would, and proposed to his beautiful girlfriend eye to eye. So it's pretty epic. So if you take nothing away from this little random talk, start with your story and literally pick out the funny component in it and get out there and tell it using some comedy techniques. You'll up engagement. It's your story. Nobody knows it better than you. And the nice thing is you never know what will happen when you tell it. So thank you very much.